All right, we have breaking news right now that we want to get to.
Right now, a 4-count indictment charging former President Donald Trump was just returned by a grand jury in the District of Columbia.
The indictment alleges that Trump pursued unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the 2020 presidential election results through 3 criminals' conspiracies. Let's go ahead and take you now live to the pictures outside the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. We are awaiting the live statement here from Special Counsel Jack Smith to happen any moment now. Those counts that he is charged with right now, the 4 counts, are conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud to deceit the obstructions of the nation's proceedings of collecting and counting and certifying the results of the presidential election, conspiracy to impede the January 6th congressional proceeding at which he collected the results of the presidential election are counted and certified.
And also, looking at those charges again, there is a total of 4. There's a conspiracy against the right to vote and to have that vote counted. The indictment also alleges that Donald Trump attempted to and did corruptly obstruct and impede the certification of the electoral vote.
Now, Trump has been summoned to appear at 4 p.m. on this Thursday, 2 days from now, before a judge. And as we said, we are anticipating a live statement here from Special Counsel Jack Smith at any moment, and we'll take that live here when it happens. Meantime, we want to go ahead and bring in our chief legal analyst, Khalif Rhodes, into the conversation as we are just finding all this blockbuster of a Tuesday come down here. And Khalif, when you look at these 4 counts here, what does that tell you?
Obviously, that what we believed was coming down came down. We assumed that it would be a variation of 3 charges from that initial target letter. This is very similar to what that initial target letter said. Obviously, this last charge is probably something that we were not looking forward to seeing, that conspiracy against the rights. But I still think it's the same variation of the deprivation of rights, all connected
and
to
that's
the
about
January.
the voting and an old civil rights type of case there.
Normally used when you're looking at folks that have stacking ballots, and attempting to, encourage votes in another way, and as opposed to what the will of people voted for. I mean, we can connect this specifically to what we already saw happen in Michigan. We can connect this to what's going on and potentially in Georgia. And when they talk about folks that they had already had interviews with, they had interviews with people that came out of Wisconsin, people that came out of Michigan, and people that came out of Georgia. The 3 locations that they are alleging that the former president had individuals that were working with him, that conspiracy portion, to attempt to overturn the election. I mean, at one point they were talking about taking the ballot machines, or the voted machines. Once that was removed from the decision, they came up with this fake elector scheme. I think this fake elector scheme is where we get the conspiracy to defraud.
In Michigan, they've already been indicted.
And I think that's the only way I can see everyone connecting, and how you have this larger conspiracy, for sure.
It almost looks like we knew this was coming on Tuesday, because when the special counsel meets, it's starting to be able to come out that something is going to happen. So we knew that this indictment could be handed up, and that's the correct terminology, right? Because an indictment is handed up, a judgment is handed down. But looking at this specifically, when we had that target letter, there was, as you said, there was 3 potential charges there. Now there's 4 counts that's in this indictment that we know of. You said very similar, but that last extra count, is it more concerning?
I wouldn't say more concerning. It's probably just finer tuning, and I take it back to Jack Smith's efficiency. We thought that we would get these charges last week at some point, and we didn't get them.
Right.
He probably still had more work to do. The special grand jury met today. Once I saw that they had left, and that was a big press in terms of them leaving for the day. Normally they were leaving. It wouldn't give much fanfare. I kind of figured that something was coming down or coming up, as we now know. And so my thought process is, with this new charge, it's still to the conspiracy part. It's still to the intimidation, and it's making sure that you're connecting the criminality. And so probably what Jack Smith's team did was say, listen, we don't think we have fully charged him like we can, and you want to make sure you do that to ensure that once you get to the trial portion of that you have the proper charging language, so that his criminal defense can't say, well, actually, you're saying that he did these things, but he actually did this. So I think he wanted to make sure, when I say he, Jack Smith's team wanted to make sure they had dotted all their I's and crossed their T's before they finished this process.
Let's talk about the gravity of the situation of today. You're talking about a former president who's going to be indicted on these 4 counts, very, very serious counts, kind of a very sad day for the United States, but also this is an historic day that has not happened here in the United States.
I mean, understatement of the century. I mean, we're talking about the peaceful transfer of power is at the bedrock of who we are as a country. It's democracy in a nutshell. The fact that we can agree to disagree, that we can stand for the points that we always want to stand for, but when an election occurs, we'll step aside and allow the transfer of whoever won to take place. We obviously saw that didn't happen, and it wasn't just January 6th. January 6th was the culmination, but there were obviously meetings in the background to overturn and undermine the people's will. And Jack Smith's investigation, I think, started at the January 6th and worked backwards. And obviously, it takes you 2.5 years almost to figure out what happened.
Yeah, and you had a lot of Congress, so what we saw play out on the January 6th hearings last fall. So all those were sent over to the DOJ, and then they had Jack Smith and the special counsel.
And so Jack Smith's team, again, I have to tip my hat. They have for everything that I've seen so far, have been extremely thorough, have been extremely diligent, and ensured that they have not left anything up for imagination. Right. They wanted to make sure that they left no stone unturned, and that this process, this whole entire process, it is historic. Yeah. And you don't want to mess it up. You want to make sure that you get it right. And when you're doing this, I could assume they're saying, wow, we're talking about the president. We're talking about conversations that you would see in a movie.
It's historic. I do want to mention, though, despite Trump's legal woes right now, almost half the country, if they were voting today for the next president of the United States, would vote for Donald Trump.
And I think that underscores just how far we are. What has catapulted the former president to his success, both in the business world and in politics, is him being able to, capture people's wills, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. If it's an entertainment process with you're fired, that captured, and it resonated with people. Make America Great resonated with a certain segment of society that will stand behind him regardless of what allegations are. And so I think his whole candidacy underscores where we are as a country. But in terms of his legal woes, it's only going to get worse. If Save America is supporting him, if it's the backbone of your legal defense, your legal defense fund started with $100 million. In the last 2 years, you spent $56 million cash on hand. Now you only have $4 million.
And they're asking for $60 million.
You're asking for refunds back.
Yeah.
It's setting up to be problematic for your defense. I mean, you got attorneys in 3 different states right now, potentially 4, that are probably billing you between $1,500 to $2,000 per hour. It's a lot.
I want to take our viewers in right now. We are monitoring Jack Smith. A special counsel is set to be able to deliver a statement. And last time we saw Jack Smith giving a statement after an indictment, it was very short, very brief. So what can we expect, Khalif, coming from today?
The exact same thing. I mean, as Jack Smith has kind of catapulted himself into the public eye, he seems to be someone that is very quiet and very to the point. They camped outside of him at the subway when he was trying to get lunch. He made no comment to reporters a few weeks ago. He seems like, I'm about the business of making sure that I do the will of the people. As a special prosecutor, he's prosecuting not on behalf of himself, but on behalf of the American people. So I believe today, because he doesn't want to do any prosecutorial misconduct and make any statements that talks about the former president's guilt, he'll just make various vague statements that talk about how we followed all the evidence, how we make sure that we allowed the evidence to lead us to this point, that no one is above the law. All the comments that you typically will hear from a prosecutor that doesn't want to taint the case or potentially taint their jury pool.
Special Counsel Smith here, it seems pretty quick. I mean, after the grand jury just wrapped up today, and then within hours, probably an hour or 2 hours, we're going to have this special statement. Describe that process. Is that fast that he wants to get this out there, or normally would you waited a couple days like what happened before?
If we're looking at his last one with Mar-a-Lago, I think we indicted him, and a half hour later we're ready to talk about it. I think he wants to move on. There's other things that are happening. We have the Georgia investigation, and so he's someone that probably wanted to come forward with this a lot sooner. I was just waiting for the grand jury to let me know that it was there.
Right, and last week when we saw that they had a meeting with Trump, that Trump said that the meeting went well.
Productive.
He was productive, was his exact quote. To where we are now.
And that was about J6, but the meeting was, but the other superseding indictment was about the documents.
Right, it was on that day that we almost felt like it was a big switcheroo, because here it is that they had exactly what you said. He met about this, but then they were also working on this. So they're working on a lot of things at one time.
They are. I mean, so the only thing that I could say about that is that obviously that's Fannie Willis and her team down there in Georgia. That's the district attorney in Fulton County. And so obviously we need to make sure that Jack Smith's team is Mar-a-Lago in the D.C. investigation. So I'm assuming that he's leading all of those, but he has teams,
Right.
numbers of teams, because when they even met with them, most of the report said it was Trump's attorneys and Jack Smith's team
Right.
that met with him. That they didn't even mention Jack Smith was in that meeting.
Right.
And so I'm assuming that he's directing and pulling the strings to ensure that his team is doing a thorough investigation.
Are you surprised at all that with all of this, I mean, as journalists, we're trying to be able to dig and get information. There aren't any leaks. I mean, we are learning the information as we are receiving it, reporting the information, but you're not hearing a lot of what is coming before it actually comes up.
I think that's pretty typical on the federal side. On the federal side, it's very, we're going to submit an indictment and we're going to immediately ask for it to be under seal. And you saw that happen. The indictment was handed up, and then immediately after that, the judge sealed it. They required that they summoned individuals to be present at court on Thursday, and it doesn't say who yet. So as you mentioned, we're learning everything in real time.
Right.
That is typically the federal process, more akin to mafia type cases, where you see prosecution of, for RICO cases, where you're attempting to get crimes or connect crimes to an individual that may not have firsthand committed the crime,
Right.
but had other individuals working at their behest. This is exactly like you see with a Gotti or anything like that.
Khalif, hold on just a second. We just wanted to say we just got from the booth the word there, 2-minute warning, so we're expecting Special Counsel Jack Smith to go ahead and give us that announcement here in just a minute. As you see, someone here is talking, but
A lot of times right now, they're just checking with reporters to make sure that they have mics
Mic
all,
checks, we
all
just had that,
together,
yeah.
right, and making sure that everybody can be able to hear as he comes up, because I think that this statement is going to be very brief. Looking at these 4 specific charges that we're seeing in this indictment right here, before when we had that target letter came out, you said there was one that was very concerning for you. When you're looking at these 4 charges here of this indictment, is there anything that stands out to you as probably the biggest, that would have considerably the most time that might go being with the charge?
I mean, the totality of them is the biggest thing for me. Again, it's sometimes a pinch yourself moment where you have to recognize we're still talking about the former president of the United States conspiring to stop a lawful election. So for me, that's probably the biggest thing. In terms of criminality, it's the deprivation of rights. Anything of that type of charge, or this new updated charge, which was the conspiracy against rights, I mean, that's potentially 10 years in prison. I mean, so you're not talking about a misdemeanor charge. You're not talking about something where it's some fine, or we were talking about in Manhattan. What we've recognized is as these investigations have progressed, or at least as we've become aware of the investigations, the level of punishment has also progressed. We were in Manhattan talking about the most was a fine. 4 years potentially in prison, but it was not likely he would do any prison time, fine, and walk away. Now we're saying in Mar-a-Lago there's a potential for, 15 to 20 years. Now he's a potential to maybe 40 to 50 years. Each one of these charges have significantly increased.
it's a tremendously broad investigation here. 4 counts, but there could be numerous, dozens and dozens of charges here when you're talking about what happened surrounding all of J6.
I totally agree. And I mean, and it's probably not just him. I mean, obviously, that's why we see in the Mar-a-Lago case, you have the 3 individuals that have been charged now, potentially 2 more coming down the road.
Reporting is that there are 6 co-conspirators that are going to be identified in this.
Right, and so each one of those folks, hopefully that defense fund that they've been using will now be able to get that $60 million back so they can support those other individuals, as the spokesperson for the campaign said, that have been wrongfully charged and overreached by the President Biden's Department of Justice.
Looks like there's some movement in the room right now, but as we're waiting for Special Counsel Jack Smith to come in and be able to give that statement, you alluded to a little bit of it, of what was going out of Michigan today. This happening on the exact same day as this indictment, as we're able to see Jack Smith walk in right now. Let's take you up there, as I'm sure this is going to be very quick, to listen to what his statement is going to be.
Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full. The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th are heroes. They are patriots and they are the very best of us. They did not just defend a building or the people sheltering in it. They put their lives on the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people. They defended the very institutions and principles that define the United States. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment, and our investigation of other individuals continues. In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. In the meantime, I must emphasize that the indictment is only an allegation and that the defendant must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. I would like to thank the members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are working on this investigation with my office, as well as the many career prosecutors and law enforcement agents from around the country who have worked on previous January 6th investigations. These women and men are public servants of the very highest order, and it is a privilege to work alongside them. Thank you.
Why didn't you charge any of the other?
All right, you've been listening there to Special Counsel Jack Smith talk about the 4-count indictment that was handed up today, unsealed by the grand jury here in the District of Columbia against Donald J. Trump.
And if you're just joining us right now, we have our chief legal analyst, Holly Frodes, joining us here to be able to dive deeper into understanding what we just heard, what we are learning today about these 4 counts that are inside this indictment. He says Donald Trump is innocent until proven guilty. He said this is only an allegation, but it looks like they have hardcore evidence to be able to prove their case. But it really took us back as to what happened on January 6th. And we covered that when you had looking at January 6th.
Unprecedented assault on democracy is what he was saying back in that day. Yeah.
And the hearings that we covered in terms of, going through step by step and the evidence that we're able to see, and to right now bringing this to Donald Trump with the actual indictment. Holly Frodes.
This is a lot. I mean, what I can tell you is that the comment with him saying that he's innocent till proven guilty and ensuring that he makes that statement, obviously, to protect the prosecutorial misconduct and ensure that today's press conference was not swaying public opinion. Excellent job.
Also with the public opinion out there from the Trump side that is trying to attack the Department of Justice.
I mean, that's what they do. Jim Jordan, Republican out of Ohio, Trump did nothing wrong. When you drain the swamp fights back. That's his response to today's indictment. In the coming moments up there, it came out. And one of the other representatives says, yet another dark day in America. And I can totally agree. If we're taking it back to January 6th, I was here. We covered that event. It was something that we had never seen before. You can't even make the connection to a third world country doing things like that, because most of the countries that you would make the allegations about wouldn't have a democratic process. It may have been a dictator that they're overthrowing, but you're talking about a process where the American people elected individuals, and there were at some point folks did not like that election results and decided that they would take it upon themselves to change the process. That's how we have
fueled by lies.
That's what he said.
That's how we fueled by lies, and that's how we have the conspiracy. And again, I love the fact that he connects the dots. I am a huge fan when law enforcement or prosecutors are able to connect the dots and tell the story. As a criminal defense attorney, I'm looking for holes in that connection of the dots, but I can stand back and be in amazement when a person has an ability to do that, to connect the criminality between what happened January 6th and what happened in Michigan and what allegedly happened in Georgia and what could potentially would have happened in Wisconsin. Those are the things that it took a number of people to not just think that it happened. Let's go find the evidence to ensure that now the jury, a special grand jury, can go and say, we're going to hand up an indictment.
Jack Smith, that we heard from just moments ago, I feel like he made this very personal. He made the American people understand what happened that day. He said, quote, they put their lives on the line defending our country.
It goes to you can't be the party of law enforcement and at the same time bash the law enforcement agents that were there that day protecting the representatives that were in the House at that time. And so I love the fact that he made sure to let people know that it is a human that was on the other side of that.
Right.
And he brought back that I represent those people, not just the individuals that were harmed that day at the Capitol, but you, the American voter. This was about you. They attempted to defraud you.
All right, certainly a historic day here, just happening in the last few minutes there. Indictment of former President Donald Trump. Khalif Rhodes, thank you for your special
thank you so much.
expertise. We're going to
Always.
take a short break and we'll be right back.